everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace. Tonight, I am chatting with JD Stillwater about how not all scientists are atheists. And my teleprompter just died. I feel like a politician. Anyway, it's something that I took for granted and was thrilled when JD corrected me. But it's widespread myth that should be addressed. And tonight we're going to do that. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or a question. Thank you for welcoming us into your home and joining the conversation. I appreciate you all. So last week I announced that the follow-up course to my book was released, and it has been released. It's doing well. It has at this point, 12 different contributors that have gone in and done this, and it's for all the things about reconstructing, deconstructing your faith, doing all of those things. And JD is actually a member of it. So go check it out. It's gotten great reviews, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts about my book and the follow-up course. It's self-paced, and once you enroll, you have access forever, including when I add new contributors. I am so proud of it, and I hope that you love it too. We can get beyond destructive dogma, individualism, racism, homophobia, and the patriarchy if we do it together. I hope you enjoyed the course and all the wonderful people. Get in now because it has a 50% discount till the end of the month. Go to my website. Let me be technical here. There we go. Go to my website and then find the book club tab, and all of the information is there. There's also social media, so we can chat about the book and the course. I can't wait to see you there, and thanks in advance. Okay, let's meet our guest and get smarter. JD Stillwater is a science ambassador and author who writes and speaks about profound insights from natural reality, insights that drive paradigm shifts and cultural awakening. This work springs from JD's love of science and his gift of making difficult concepts graspable for non-scientists. Let's welcome JD. Hi, JD.
I'm happy to be here.
I am so happy you're here. So just to give a little background to our audience, you and I met because of the goose, and
That's right.
You had insight that I was going to be on a panel that I didn't even know about. But because of the confusion, I actually got to meet you and talk to you, and you were on my show at the Goose and got the first copy of the book coming out. And I was thrilled with your input, and I did need to make some corrections. So thank you for that so much.
It was really fun.
I'm so glad you did so. The science chapter in my book was my most insecure because, as I say in the book, my education in science for most of my school days was creationism. And so it was something that I learned on my own and really had to self-taught and go down those rabbit holes and do all of those things without a lot of input. So when you said, yes, let me, go ahead and look at this, I was like, oh, thank you, JD. Thank you. I had a physics professor look at it, and fix some of the things that he said, but there was still this, is it right? Is it not right? And you helped make it right. So thank you.
Well, it's something I really enjoy doing. A big part of my work is in interfaith spaces. I'm a council member of the Institute on Religion in an Age of Science, and I just was granted a fellowship with Sinai and Synapses, which is a Jewish-based science and religion dialogue group. So there's a lot going on in the space, and it's helpful to know a little bit about both. I don't even want to say both sides because they're not sides, and of course we'll get into that pretty soon here. But
well, and so over the weekend I yelled at my TV. Which isn't an odd occurrence, but this time it was like, see, I was watching a History Channel, Discovery Channel. I watch a lot of documentaries, and William Shatner was leading it, and he said, of course, all of science, real scientists are atheists, and they just disagree. And I'm like, I'm not the only one. And then I started yelling, but you're wrong. You're wrong. So yeah, it was something that is like, it gave me kind of like an affirmation that I wasn't a total idiot.
Right.
But one of the things that I really took for granted in my book that you corrected me on was putting a blanket over scientists and
Right.
saying that if they weren't out as a believer, then they were obviously an atheist. And I even talk about a Jewish scientist in the book, and about his views of creation and stuff like that. But I still had that break. I still had that thing in my head until talking to you, that the majority of scientists were atheists. And in fact, I did a little bit of research, and it's really only about 30%. It's not even half.
Well,
and that shocked.
Globally, there are a lot more scientists of faith. The United States, I think it skews a little bit the other way. But as you hinted, it's really hard to tell, because in doing their work, it's not, their faith is not part of their work as scientists. Right. So they don't make a big deal about it. And if they do make a big deal about it, other scientists, rightfully, I think, begin to question, is your faith influencing your results? Is it influencing the way you're collecting data? And the bottom line is that science itself is agnostic. It can't and doesn't say anything about other realms than this one, the natural realm. But scientists come from every faith tradition on the planet. Science is truly a global endeavor. It's a global community of people all trying to do this really difficult thing of exploring creation, if you will, or natural reality, if you'd rather. So I say, and this is stretching things a little bit, but I describe the endeavor of science as the only truly interfaith thing that's happening on this planet.
Interesting.
Because it's not an interfaith endeavor, but it's populated by people that come from all of the major faith traditions on the planet. And as you said, many of them are still devout practitioners of their faith. And they kind of have to draw some boundary between their religious practice and their scientific work. But I think for the vast majority of them, they are exploring creation. However, whoever or whatever you think created all this, they're doing in some ways a religious task as they explore the handiwork of the forces that made this reality that we share.
Well, and I think that one of the points that you made to me was that I generalized Dawkins, right? I look at Dawkins as the voice of scientists, and he's not, right? But because, and I think that William Shatner even related to Dawkins on the show I was watching, because it does have that. I think it was like 30 to 37% worldwide were atheists in the science population. On the other side, about 30 to 35% were Christians. And then the mix of everything else were across the spectrum, from Hinduism to Judaism, all of those things. But I think that people like Dawkins are silencing people because of the fears of mockery, dismissiveness, or something like that. So are they just, I understand the judgment that would come from announcing their faith, but are they keeping it quiet to avoid that? Or just because, like you said, it just doesn't matter?
I think it's both. In this country in particular, I think there's a greater risk of some kind of censure if you are very vocal about your faith.
And I talk about that.
It probably varies. Probably there are as many answers to that question as there are practicing scientists.
Right. And one of the things that you had me do, or had me sounds kind of dominating, but suggested that I do, and I welcomed it wholeheartedly, was to really clarify in my book when I was generalizing, saying scientists, we're going after Christianity and beliefs, and you're like, no, you have to define that it is the atheist scientists as opposed to believers. Like I said, before talking to you, I didn't even know there was a distinction.
Yeah, science is non-theistic is probably the best way to describe it. I think atheism has come to mean anti-theism.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that, but the loudest voices are the neo-atheists, and they tend towards a tone that is anti-theist. And the science itself is non-theistic. And honestly, I describe myself that way too. It's not that I have a belief one way or the other. It's more that it doesn't matter much to me. How I live my life isn't determined by whether there are other universes or other realms or not. For me, what matters, the short way of saying it is nature is enough for me, especially if I take nature to heart. So when we think about science, it often brings to mind a very heady sort of academic thinking way of approaching the world. And that's important, that's good. But there's another step we can take of taking all of that amazing, awesome, wondrous things that the scientific community is revealing about the natural world and taking all of that to heart as well. And when I do that, it enriches my life profoundly in ways that for me can only be described as spiritual. It's part of my spirituality as a non-theist to study science and revel in just the amazingness, the glory of what nature has to offer. And there are patterns in it as well that help inform how I orient myself in the world. The biggest and most obvious one is that science now shows that everything in the universe is deeply connected on all levels, from the cosmic level down to the quantum level. It's one unfolding. It's one thing that's evolving over 13.8 billion years. And we're just this very precious, very important, but also very tiny piece of it. And so it kind of makes my heart sing to contemplate that. And that's a kind of spirituality.
Totally. And as I say in the book, and in that section, studying science actually brought me back to my faith. Mm-hmm. It actually, where I was like, okay, I can get around this. I can't believe anymore in the constructed being of a lot of religions, a godlike figure of matter and mass. Mm-hmm. But I can definitely hop on the energy of love and using that energy and finding those things. Looking to nature is how I see God now. I don't see God as this cult leader is the best way that I can say it at this point. It's more of a let's get into the vibes and let's love our neighbor. And I see miracles in nature every single day. Yeah. And all of that got me out of the church, but also back into some type of divinity that I think the universe has.
Yeah, and I honor and appreciate and respect that for many people, belief in an intervening personal God that is with us in every moment of every day and is watching out for us is a crucial aspect of who they are.
Yeah.
I don't personally resonate with that, but I honor and respect and affirm that is important for many, many people. And I wouldn't in any way want to undermine or take that away from them. And I don't see my approach to this as somehow more evolved than theirs. But we know that we evolved to be religious creatures. It is in our DNA to be religious, to look for the profound and the sublime in everything. And so it's normal, it's natural for us to have a religious sensibility, and how people meet that sensibility is going to be different for every person.
Right.
And that's a good thing.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I stress, every week on the show, in the book, and even in the follow-up course, is that as long as love is your foundation, that's all that should matter. If you're using any type of God or any type of figure whatsoever to divide, conquer, then I think that you need to check your faith.
Yeah.
But as long as you are trying to be a more loving person, love your neighbor, it doesn't matter. And that's why I put so many people into the follow-up course, was because I wanted to offer those types of things for people who still believe differently, that still hold on to that God as a being because they need that. Still hold on to Jesus as divine because they need that. Whatever someone needs to be a more humane, loving person, I'm all about.
And when you come to understand the vast, even in a really basic high school level, the incredible complexity that makes up even a single cell, a single skin cell in your body. For me personally, and for other people that I work with, that can only fill you with love and appreciation and gratitude for the existence of life at all.
Yeah, I think, and I say this in the book also, I think the emancipation from nature that humans did really condemned nature as opposed to lifting it up and being able to search for those types of things. I mean, I have a section on animals, basically putting out there that I think animals are in many ways are superior to us. So much of religion says we are their dominators, we can do as we please. Was it Einstein that said, look to nature to see all, and then you will find God?
Maybe I'm not familiar with that one from Einstein, but I know indigenous societies have been saying that forever. And Judaism says that too. Even Genesis. I just came off another webinar about, I think the title of it was, "Whose World Is It Anyway?"
Oh, wow.
It was a rabbi speaking about many aspects of the Torah, but the thing that stuck out for me was from Genesis. There are passages of Genesis that sound, especially the translations, sound like we're supposed to have dominion over the earth. But underneath that, and in more places, I wish I could quote them the way he did, it's very clear that the earth belongs to the divine. The earth is not human beings to own. It's ours to rent, to borrow. And he used the analogy of, you're on a ship and you declare that because I paid for this seat on the ship, I'm going to drill a hole through the hull under my seat. And the people around you were saying, no, you're going to kill all of us. But you're saying, I paid for this seat. This is mine. That's not how it's supposed to work, at least in the three Abrahamic traditions that are based on Genesis.
Well, and it also says in the Old Testament that a good king takes care of their people. A good king makes sure that their people are healthy, the animals are fed. So it does say in the Bible that the level of dominion is not in ownership, it is a protection. Our egos turned it into an ownership and trophy hunting and stuff like that. But to see true nature work in action, where animals stop in front of a stranger who has passed and will stay there for days, we step over the bodies, and complain that they were in our way. So there's so much in nature that is more loving and closer to the divine than we are. And I think that's our struggle of humanity, is to try and emulate that, not dishonor it, not dominate it.
Yeah, and Robin Wall Kimmerer in her book Braiding Sweetgrass makes clear that, at least for her Native American tradition, they regarded human beings as the youngest siblings of nature's family. We are the young ones who are supposed to learn from and follow the example of our elder siblings, meaning the other creatures on this planet, the non-human ones.
And not be the fucking brats that we are.
Yeah.
The petulant
That's just
children.
mine, mine, mine.
Right. Let's destroy everything and then ask for more.
Yeah.
It's just so bad.
Well, and I think part of that whole worldview of dominion comes from this idea that this natural world is the mundane one, and that the real world, the important world, the one that matters, the world that matters, is the heavenly one. And that came about at a time when the heavens literally meant all that stuff above the clouds.
Yeah.
So, our ancestors in the Middle Ages and before, that's what heaven was. You would look up to see heaven, and the stars were considered part of that crystalline sphere that was part of God's realm. And so, translation is part of an issue, but what didn't ever survive the translation or didn't get retranslated was this idea that this world is the shadow one that doesn't matter. It's just everything here is temporary and mundane, and only the heavens matter. And I think what we're finding, especially with environmental catastrophes that are currently and ongoing, this is the world that we share. No matter what your faith tells you about other realms or none, we're having this conversation in this natural world using technology that's made out of atoms.
Right.
And if, we just don't have the right to desecrate creation.
Well, I think that, I talk about ego so much in my book, and this is a huge thing with this, because we feel so big. We feel like the world revolves around us. And I've had certain times in my life. One of it was, and a lot of people experience this when they go to the Grand Canyon. They see the enormity of the Grand Canyon and feel really small. Looking from space, you can't even see humanity. You can see its destruction, but you can't see humanity. So to look at ourselves as this big thing and all that matters, because that's what our ego is telling us, it diminishes everything else. It diminishes our neighbor. It diminishes our planet that we're totally destroying. I mean, I use the analogy of, God gave us this and we're destroying it like petulant children with Christmas toys and saying, well, let's just we'll find someplace else to go. It's not honoring the creation. It's not honoring anything to have such an egotistical, huge view of yourself, and not realize that you are part of an ecosystem, that we are. I say all the time, Steve Slocum, a friend of mine, said when we first started talking and met, he said, we're nothing but ants. And I was so offended by that. I was like, how dare you say that? We are so much better than ants. And all the years have passed, and I'm like, oh God, we are. We're not, but we're worse than ants, because at least ants are organized. At least ants can work together and build whole communities without destroying everything else. But yeah, I mean, we need to see more that we are more ants than kings.
I think there's a balance there. I mean, when I talk about astronomy and what astronomers and cosmologists are revealing at this time in history, really just in the last 60 to 75 years, as you said, it can make you feel really, really small. Yeah. Because in the context of 47 billion light years, that's the diameter that we can see at this point. The visible universe, 47 billion light years across. We're nothing. We're really, really small. It's mind-blowingly small. And at the same time, as far as we know, this tiny little blue dot of a planet is the only place in all of that emptiness where there are eyes to see it, hearts to beat, minds to appreciate all of that and our embeddedness in it. If this is the only place in all of the cosmos where there's life, especially intelligent life, that makes us precious beyond description, precious beyond measure.
Do you think we're the only ones? Do you think we're the only ones?
We have no evidence that there are others. I think it's very likely that in all of that vastness, up to 2 trillion galaxies, each one averaging 400 billion solar systems. It could be. But keep in mind, our whole technological civilization is even stretching the numbers about 10,000 years old. In the context of 13.8 billion years, that is nothing at all. So it could be that civilizations like ours are popping in and out of existence like glitter in a snowstorm.
I never thought of that before.
And,
wow.
And we would never overlap with any others.
Interesting.
So, to answer your question, I don't know. And that's another thing I really need to say about science. To a scientist, the most exciting statement is nobody knows. Scientists don't deal in certainties. And that's another thing that shows up a lot in the sort of the pop dialogue about science and religion.
Right.
Science proves this, or science, and actually in that same webinar, there was a thing, he had a slide that said, science isn't truth. Science is looking for truth. If the science changes, it's not because science lied, it's that science learned.
Right.
We're always learning. And that means sometimes we change the way we have thought about things previously. But it's not, don't think of science as providing some kind of certainty. And
well, I think that a lot of people need certainty because of insecurities, because of black and white thinking.
Yep.
But I think that certainty kind of dooms us all, right? It lacks any room to grow. It lacks any room for advancement or theological growth or any of that. I mean, that's one of the things that I critique in the book about religion is their failure to grow and assimilate and say, okay, we know better, we do better now.
Right.
Science has that beauty.
Yeah.
I think I don't know.
What's that?
The universe didn't like what I just said.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think if you want simple, safe, and certain, you need a different reality to live in, because this reality is messy, ambiguous, it's paradoxical in some ways, and however it got made or designed or created, the forces that this reality arose from made it this way, made it complex, messy, ambiguous, paradoxical. I mean, you don't have to get too deep into quantum mechanics to realize that the universe is kind of capricious. It plays with us. And that's why quantum mechanics is so exciting, because it's this puzzle that is just really, really hard to work out. I mean, we've been working on it for almost 100 years and we still don't understand it. Yeah. And to a scientist, that's not frightening or off-putting. That's really exciting. And go ahead.
Even think that ignorance is, I use ignorance as a lack of knowledge. Some people say ignorance is refusing because its basis is an ignore, and that's stupidity, another word. But I mean, no one goes into the first, second, third, fourth, or even college going, I know all of this. And why we think that we can do that in our lives or that any other aspect of our lives, especially a faith of things unseen, just makes us dumb. It prevents us from loving our neighbor. It prevents community. It prevents all of that because we're so absorbed in ourselves.
There's a really strong thread in theology that lifts up doubt as a big part of an active theological stance, active religious practice. Well, in Christianity too, especially like process theology. I have this presentation that I actually created about 12 years ago now, called 7 Candles. And it's how this work of mine got started. And right in the beginning, I point out that sort of in pop culture, science and religion are thought of as being opposite ends of a spectrum. You can use reason and focus on nature and be scientific, or you can use faith and be religious and spiritual and that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think that's completely obsolete now, especially with the wonders that science is revealing about the natural world. And so I offer this other slide. The next slide is a different spectrum. And my spectrum runs from, I'm just going to pull up the slide to make sure I get it right. Dogma on one end to ambiguity on the other end. Separation versus connection. Conviction, self-righteous conviction versus an appreciation of mystery. On that spectrum, the neo-atheists and the biblical literalists, the fundamentalists, they're all on the same end of my spectrum because they're all about certainty and conviction and knowing I'm right and you're wrong. And here's why I'm right and blah, blah, blah. Their end of the spectrum is about truth. The other end of the spectrum, ambiguity and connection and mystery and doubt, those are for a faith, if you will, that is evolving.
Right.
And whose an important tenet is doubt and ambiguity and mystery, but also appreciation of the unknown, appreciation that we probably won't ever know everything. There won't ever be a theory of everything.
And that's okay.
It's more than okay. It's wonderful. It would be terrible if we understood everything in some final way. Yeah.
Right.
It would be the end of science and probably the end of religion too.
Right. I will never forget, I was at a summer camp, Bethel summer camp. I was 12 years old. And the speaker said, there cannot be any aliens because God wouldn't send his son to die twice.
Oh, he was not a Mormon.
But I mean, I held on to that for so many years thinking, well, of course, that's the way it is. But being from that evangelical background, being from the background of no questions, this is the way it has to be. There can't be anybody besides us because of Jesus. Now I look at it as, wow, that's such small thinking. Wow, how long did it take for him to rationalize that and then just to close everything off? I think that one of the most powerful statements I have now, and I use it literally daily, is I don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Talking with friends, it's or what do you mean by that? In my 20s or 30s, I would never have said anything and then spent the next 6 months wondering, what did that person mean? And coming up with my own examples and assumptions and all of this. And then in the end, throughout my life, I'd say, well, what did you mean by that? And it was completely different than I had ever assumed. Yeah. Anyway, so when we have those blocks and we assume that we know everything that's going on, and we are unwilling to admit our ignorance or just lack of knowledge on the world around us and everything, that's when those blocks start. That's when it is in us versus them. That's when science has to be this and religion has to be this. And the irony of it all is I stress in my book that all does not exist in our universe. There's nothing all. For everything there is a contradiction or something like that. And then I did it with scientists in my book.
we are human.
I'm always saying all doesn't exist, and then you're like, shit.
Yeah, I have a relative who likes to say, "Is your heart beating? You're a hypocrite."
There you go. Yeah.
There's nobody that's exempt. Nobody is consistent 100% of the time.
Right, because it's all about growth, right? I mean, I try really hard to not be a hypocrite, but some of it is based in ignorance.
Yeah.
I was 12, I've grown out of it, but Jesus wouldn't die twice. And there was a certainty there because he said it and it was in the halls of the church, and that made sense.
Well, before 1400, that exact same argument would have said there can't be people on other continents. Right? Which is that's why I made the comment about Mormons, because Mormons believe that Jesus came here to North America.
Right. Wow, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I
So
mean,
I wonder
yeah,
if he's ever been confronted on that.
interesting. I love that. Yeah, I mean, because totally, I never looked at it that way before. That's an aha moment. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, the minuscule thing that we make into our big reality um, can change everything, right? I
Mhm.
mean, just the fact that I wasn't taught science because I went to a Christian school set me back so many years, but it also kept me indoctrinated, right? It kept
Mhm.
me in
Mhm.
their form to not look at, don't ask questions, don't look. Whenever I presented the dinosaurs, I got, well, we don't understand the ways of God, or they're fake or something like that. But to really ratchet up all of these things that are contradictory to science because they're in religion, I think is why we're still in two camps.
That brings up something that I really loved in your book. I think it was on page 12, and I think it was actually you were quoting another another theologian or something, but my paraphrase of it was, when we confuse scriptural metaphors with facts, the creator is accused of systematic deceitfulness. I love that phrase, systematic
Yeah,
deceitfulness, because you know I just don't, and I should have more. I should have more conversations with creationists, because, as we were just talking about, I may be missing something really important about their worldview. But when I think about relative dating and absolute dating of rock layers, there are these two different sciences that come at trying to figure out how old layers of rock are, that come up with the same results. And those results are that these rock layers have been here for millions of years, and
hmm,
that these fossils lived and died before these fossils, which were
right.
deposited on top of them, and these fossils on top of those. And, geology and paleontology, they're all, radiology, all these different sciences give the same answers for the age of the earth and the same answers for the different layers of rock. It seems to me that if you believe the earth is 6,000 years old, then you must also believe that God is deliberately trying to trick us into believing something else. And that's not a God I would want to believe in.
It's actually part of Christian faith that God tricked the early um, prophets with his name when it was El Shaddai, and then he came out and said it's actually Yahweh. I know I told them that, but it's actually Yahweh. And it was from a division of religions because El was the god of Baal and the Canaanites god, so they needed to split it. But in doing so, they said, well, God tricked you before. I told Elijah and, it was Daniel, all of the things that had the L ending, the L was my name, El Shaddai was my name, but it's really Yahweh. So in a
Huh.
lot of religion, God has been a trickster all the time. And one of my favorite pastors said, well, God changes his mind. And I went, then how is he good? How is he perfect? How is he above everything if he needs to learn? A supreme being couldn't change his mind, if they're doing this. A God that if what we see should be so developed, not be like us humans and not know all the answers.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting.
But we have ice cores.
Right.
Scientists go into the snow and they do the same thing with the ice as they do with the rocks and the land. I mean, this
Yep.
is proven that we can do this. But you have
Careful
even,
with that word, proven. There is overwhelming evidence.
yes, that's right. Got me on that one again.
Yeah.
Yes. But I mean, but
And just to give you grace on that, there
I
are some things that there is so much overwhelming evidence, like the Earth orbiting the sun rather than the other way around. And there are many things that science has revealed over the last 5 centuries that we take as true. They're not likely to change. There is just so much evidence that it's reasonable for us to refer to them as truths. We can refer to them as being proven. But always in the back of a scientist's mind, there's that little asterisk that says, if new evidence came along that causes us to question that, we will question it. We won't hesitate because we're going to go where nature leads us.
I love that. I think that is divine.
Me too.
So one of the things that I loved about your write-up on my book was the first sentence, when you said, I was a bit put off by the second title. The sole endeavor of science is to explore and reveal the secrets of natural reality to human beings. It seems to me that for those who believe in God, science performs a great service to both God and man, to reveal God's handiwork to God's children as they mature enough to be ready for such a powerful knowledge. No verses involved. I quickly learned this was the point of the section, and that was a good agreement. And then we went, yeah! Should have put a question mark after the God versus science, but that was the point, because of being raised in this evangelicalism and everything science was evil and from the devil and just trying to prove there isn't a God and all of those things. I wanted to get that information out there.
Yeah. And what I said there, which I had forgotten about maturity, until we are mature enough to handle the knowledge, well, Science and the technology that grows out of science has gone way faster than our social sciences, if you want to approach it that way, or I would say our spiritual ethics. We haven't. Michael Dowd, my friend Michael Dowd, who's now passed, would say that religion is not doing its job, because the job of religion is to keep us in right relation with reality, to help us maintain our integrity with reality, however you perceive that reality. And it's not keeping up. Technology and what science is revealing, and the technology then takes that knowledge and runs with it. And technology in a greed-driven economic system like we have is quickly outstripping our ability to be wise with that knowledge. And it's up to religion to guide us in that.
But if their sole focus is the afterlife and not reality, you're not going to win.
Who cares? Right. This world doesn't matter.
Right. I mean, it matters for our soul. If we're going to burn in the whole contradiction, clusterfuck of heaven and hell and all of that leads people to be insecure about their beliefs and causes these things to, dig in and go, no, I'm right. Mm-hmm. But if you don't care about this reality except for your sins, then nothing matters. I mean, we see it with the GOP and support for Israel. That the religious right wants the destruction of Israel. They're very vocal about that. But you have these types of things go on and say, well, this needs to happen, this needs to happen. And you go on these types of religious beliefs because the afterlife is the only thing that matters. Destruction here is just part of their process. Well, that's why I was so into the science when I was doing the book, because I was like, oh my God, I get you. I saw the community, I saw everything, which had been blinded me in church.
Mm. I have noticed that people who think that way tend to backtrack a little bit when you ask, do you have grandchildren? Or do you have children? Suddenly the violent death of their child or their grandchild in a flood or a heat wave or war, whatever it is, suddenly there's a little bit of hesitation about, as long as they go to heaven, it'll be fine.
Yeah, when it's personal, when it's their loss, not those other evil people, the thems.
Yeah.
Well, we are almost at the top of the hour, and I've only read one thing that you wrote on this book comment. What else do we want to talk about before we hang? You said you wanted to talk about a few things.
We've covered most of them.
Okay.
Quick thing, science does have limitations. Science can only explore things that are public, testable, and replicable. If it's not public, if it's happening inside your head or it's your dreams or whatever, it's real. What you're experiencing is real, but science probably can't explore it.
Right.
There are all kinds of aspects of our lives and our interactions with other people that science can't do much with because it's not public. It's personal. Has to be testable too. You have to be able to ask nature a question in the form of an experiment and get an answer that's definitive in some way. And the scientific term for that is you have to have a null hypothesis. You have to have some statement that the experiment will demonstrate or provide evidence for being right or wrong. So it has to be testable. And then other people have to be able to do the same test and get the same result. It has to be replicable. So if all three of those aren't in place, then it's an aspect of reality that science can't explore, at least not yet. And there are lots of things like that.
And we talked about that when we talked about the book, about consciousness, about, those types of things that are not demonstrable, that cannot be replicated, and therefore out of the realm of scientists.
Yeah.
Miracles, things that can't be replicated, but that you saw are not something outside of science. We can leave that to faith. We can leave that to mysticism or something to that effect. But if it's not demonstrable, then it's outside of science as well.
You're right. It's outside science's ability to make a statement about it one way or the other. Yeah.
You got to prove it, but it's not real.
Right. You gotta come up with evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence or something.
Yes.
Like I want to mention that there is a worldview and a community of people with that worldview that's called religious naturalism. These are people who take nature to heart and for whom nature is enough. So by and large, they are non-theists, and they get their religiousness. They bring their religious sensibilities to experiencing the natural world.
Okay, I feel like a million questions popping up in my head. Isn't that Wiccan? Isn't that?
No, Wiccans are part of paganism.
Yeah, that was going to be my next thing. It's not paganism.
No. These are people with a science-oriented worldview who the problem here is language. That they bring a religious sensibility, which doesn't mean belief necessarily in any other realms or heaven and hell or any of that stuff. They're focused on nature and natural reality. And that is the basis for a kind of religiosity that incorporates reverence, joy, awe and wonder, appreciation, gratitude, humility, all of these qualities and values that we might have traditionally associated with religion, they are finding in the natural world as science is revealing it to us.
I like that.
And so it's not for everybody, but it's available. And so I want people to know that it's available. And if they just do a Google search for religious naturalism, they'll probably find the Religious Naturalist Association. I'm on their board.
Okay.
And we're a small but global community. We have about 1,200 members from all over the planet. And people are welcome to check it out. And if it resonates, join us. And if it doesn't, that's okay too.
Well, and talking about science progressing, I mean, while Islam and Judaism, not much of Christianity, believe that anything that has breath praises the Lord. They believe that there are sentient beings. But even 100 years ago, we did not understand the communication between animals. We didn't understand their breadth of consciousness, of their capacities, other than, again, to serve us. Now we are understanding, their voices and hearing in tones that we do not hear, and all of those things. So I think that as we progress, unless we just blow the planet up, as we progress as a society, we will start to see through science things that we didn't see before, like, the communication between animals. I mean, we didn't know that elephants could communicate 30 miles.
Right.
50 years ago. We didn't know Most of the stuff we're now, because of technology and the time that I always said, where is all this time that technology was supposed to save us?
Mm.
It's being delved into these types of things to understand the animals, to understand more, things in our environment, in our planet, even that trees, stay away from each other and that they communicate with each other. 300 years ago, someone would have laughed you off this planet and said, what are you
Scientists. And I studied animal behavior in college. They told us be very careful not to anthropomorphize these behaviors.
Yeah.
And there was a reason for that, and it was a good reason. But now, 35 years later, we're finding out that no, even ducks are doing the same things with the same parts of their brains that we do. So this really hard division between humans and other creatures is evaporating. And I think for most people who are paying attention to the news about animal sentience, it brings us to a place of compassion. Inevitably, it brings us to have more compassion for our older siblings on this planet.
I talk about how there is a tickle test for rats, and how rats love to be tickled, and how gorillas laugh. And, so when we are seeing these types of things, I mean, by the way, I would love to be a rat tickler for a profession. That would just be hilarious. But, when we are seeing these things, their love, their compassion, their concern, we can't help but to humanize them. I'm not going to try. I can't say that word. I've been trying for 30 years to say that word, the anthropomorphize.
It's a tough one. It is.
Yeah, I'm just going to say humanized. But yeah, I mean, again, thinking that we are the only ones, on this planet that have that ability has prevented the studies. Mm-hmm. Now that, these studies are taking place, we can't help but to think that.
You mentioned elephants communicating over long distances. Just last week, a study came out about female elephants, at least, having individual names. They call each other by name. And when the names are below, they're subsonic, they're below human hearing, but you can record them and duplicate them with a big speaker. Right. When they play them, only one elephant's head looks up to see who's calling her. And they're not repetitions. They don't say their own name. Other people say their name. So they're, in that regard, they're very like us. So
I have dogs. I mean, my aspiration is to be as good as my dog. So, or an elephant. The study that I did on them was just so heartwarming. Yeah. And then also so raging that we, again, just destroy them for our own needs and all of those things. We got to get over ourselves and start being more natural.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that's all I have.
This was wonderful.
I mean, we could keep talking for hours, but
I know we did on the phone. It was so awesome. Right. We should have recorded it. Every time we'll talk, damn it, I should have recorded that call. But JD, I love your input so much. I love you as a person and all that you're doing to try and negate these myths of individuality when we're all just intertwined.
I love this work. I think what you're doing is really important, and I invite people into the conversation. Sherry's course is a great way to start. You could go to my website, jdstillwater.earth, and there's a lot there.
Got something for that. Hold on. There we go. Yes, JD is in the follow-up course talking about this same type of thing. And then you'll be able to reach out to him directly if you need to or want to through the course. It was definitely my honor to have him join in. And after this, 4 pages, notes on my science section, it was like, oh, we got to talk. So it was so awesome. But definitely look JD up, reach out to him. Any final words? And
one last thing, if you would like me to come and speak at your church or your interfaith community, I would love to hear from you.
That would be awesome.
Remember, science is your friend, and it can be a source of deep spiritual enrichment. That's what I want to leave you with.
To look to nature to understand God, and you can't look to nature without science.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and send you backstage and close the show. Right. Thank you so much. What a great show. Again, I could talk to JD forever. I think we were on the phone for like over an hour when he sent me this, and I just loved it. It was, again, I'm okay with being wrong. Doesn't feel so good all the time, but with something like this that makes me grow and appreciate everything more, I'm always open to that. Thank you so much for watching and your input. Patrick, I didn't get to your comment. I'm so sorry, but thank you for your continued support as the show's producer. Next week's show is hopefully with psychic medium Valentina. Unfortunately, she was hit really hard by the hurricanes, but I'm hoping that she will be here. If not, we'll reschedule her and do a show on the election, which is almost here. Vote early if you can, but just vote. It is your civic duty. It is your right. Make sure that we keep those rights. If you liked it, if you like the show, share it and subscribe. Thanks again for everything. Let me move this. Oh, Patrick, you need to be doing this for me, or I need a third arm or something. If you like the show, subscribe, check out the course, check out my book. Thanks again for watching. Have a wonderful week. And as always, walk in love. Mwah.